Hi everyone, and welcome to the first of this series of 3 webinars on mental health first aid. It's a new topic for us. It's really quite an exciting area. So please say hi on the chat. Shakura's looking after the chat today. Lovely to see lots of familiar names. Hi Laura from Aberdeen, Jane, Rachel, Loretta, James. Okay, so keep my eye off the chat for a second, and I'll just give you a little bit of background. I've just been involved with Norwich City Council mental wellbeing strategy, and we've been working with one of the managers there quite closely on this, and I'm really excited about the potential for Shiatsu to help out in the workplace. And I've really learned a lot in the last few weeks, and I want to just share what I've learned with you, and also kind of work on a possible project proposal, which I'll tell you more about in a moment. So let's get straight on. I'm going to share the slides with you now and just see what we're going to be up to in the next hour. Okay, so here we are, Shiatsu and mental health first aid. It's a 3 webinar series. I'll just explain later on what we're going to do in the second 2 parts, but let's have a quick look at the program. So what I'd like to do is just introduce the whole idea of where we're at with mental health in the workplace right now. I'd like to share with you a very important report that's come out recently called the Deloitte report. I've actually got a copy of it for you as well, which I'm going to share so you can download it. I'm going to introduce you to the whole idea of what is mental health first aid, what its role is, and what mental health first aiders are. And then I'd like to share with you a pilot case study, which is just, the ink has not even dried on it yet. I was actually working on it last week, and it's just been put forward to Norwich City Council as a result of an invitation to take part in the launch of their mental wellbeing strategy, which was a few weeks ago. We were, the Shiatsu Centre in Norwich here, we were invited to take part in that, and I'll just describe a little bit about that as we go through. And then what I've been doing as part of this is I've been developing a Shiatsu-based protocol to provide support for mental health in the workplace. Now, I think the thing is, of course, we all know, Shiatsu practitioners, that there is a massive somatic aspect to mental health. And that's where we really do have a lot of expertise in terms of working with the somatic aspects and how that can support mental health through the nervous system, through breathing patterns, through focusing. We've got so many resources, and I think it's really just a case of just packaging them, realizing what we've got and presenting them in order to really we can really make a huge difference. So I'm going to just continue on and just see what else we've got here. I'm going to work through this in the next hour. If you've got any questions, we'll have a Q&A session at the end there. Yeah, hope you enjoy the next hour. So here we go. Okay, so there were a couple of reports, really important reports. There's a Stevenson Pharma review of mental health and employers. That was in 2017. And that was all about raising awareness of mental health in the workplace. And this 2020 Deloitte report, in fact, I'll share it with you right now. I wouldn't recommend you read it right now because I'm going to take you through it anyway, but you might want to just download it, and you can actually download it from the internet as well if you want to find it. But this is a really, really important report, and it's also extremely interesting because it's based on lots of research all the way through the UK about mental health in the workplace, but it also surveys the return on investment, ROI, which is basically how much employers get back for investing in looking after their employees, basically. And there's really some very interesting, but also some quite shocking things in that report, and we're going to explore those very, very soon. So first of all, I just thought I'd run a poll just to find out where you're at with this, just to find out if I'm already talking to the converted. Are you aware of this report, the Deloitte report? I'm just going to run that as a poll. Let's just see if you'd just like to vote on that and let me know. Okay, look, someone is. So we've got about 85, 90, 87, 90% not no, and quite a few not sures. Okay, so I was exactly the same as you, only a few weeks ago until I started investigating this whole thing, by the way. So as I mentioned, the Deloitte report is really important because it looks at the cost to employers of poor mental health. And if you're working in a corporate environment, obviously there is, you'd like to think the employers would like to look after their employees anyway, their health anyway. But when it really comes down to it, the bottom line is it's very, very expensive to have an environment where there's poor mental health. And you can see that there's been an increase in 16%, 45 billion pounds lost in a year due to poor mental health in the workplace. And in fact, if you want to see the actual video, I've actually got the video, I've downloaded it for you. And you can actually see the guy presenting the Deloitte report. I've got it right here. So if you just bear with me, I'm just going to run that video for you. I'm just going to get myself out of the way, and here we go.
As consulting human capital leader with a focus on the future of work, changes in the workplace and within the workforce is of huge interest to me and the clients I work with. Deloitte has recently launched a new piece of research about mental health and well-being in today's labour market, examining changes in workplace practices which have added to poor mental health. In the context of the future of work, technology is generally very positive, a force for good, enhancing employees' experiences at work. However, our latest report shows that the increased use of technology in the workplace has negatively impacted mental health, with some pretty big implications for employers. Poor mental health is costing UK employers £29 billion in reduced productivity due to presenteeism every year. We are seeing an increase in this presenteeism. This is where employees are physically present at work, but not working at their most productive. Technology has contributed to an always-on culture. Having the ability to work out of hours makes it harder for some people to maintain their mental health. An increasing number of UK employees are struggling to disconnect from work, part of a rising trend called leavism. More employees than ever are working out of hours and are not taking time off when they need to, leading to burnout. People are a business's biggest and most important asset. Creating a positive work environment is fundamental to the success of any organisation. This includes mental health and well-being in the workplace. Understanding more about the relationship between mental health and work is in all of our interests. So how can employers tackle this? Read our report to find out.
There you go. There it is from the actual one of the team that put the report together itself. And you can see it's all very corporate speak and everything, but you get the gist, don't you? There's basically big trouble in the workplace due to mental health issues. And this is where I really believe we've been invited in anyway at the Shiatsu Centre to help out. And we're developing a project, which I'll explain a little bit later on when we get through the report. It's all very, very interesting stuff. So here we go. I'm just going to take it into the next slide. Okay, so here we go. 2019, Thriving at Work review. Remember, there was a Thriving at Work report in 2017, which is like 2 years later. And what happened in those 2 years, they tried to get employers on board to create some change, but it didn't quite go as well as they thought, as we'll see in a minute. So let's just poll you again and find out amongst your clients, because you're pretty much all professional Shiatsu practitioners, have you noticed an increase in stress and mental health issues over the last few years? Let's find out from the grassroots here and see how we feel as a group. So amongst your clients, have you noticed an increase in stress and mental health issues over the last few years? So let's have a look. Okay, we had the pandemic as well, which has added to that tendency, but you can see that tendency was already starting right the way from 2017, 2019. And look, we've got an overwhelming 83% of you voting that you have noticed an increase, and we've certainly noticed an increase here in the Shiatsu Centre. So look what's happened. These are the changes that have happened this was in the 2 years between the initial report and when they reviewed it. They did say that there's been a reduction in the level of stigma, more social awareness, and some greater support for employees, especially in large organisations. So there were some positives. I just want to say a little bit about that, my experience with that, with Norwich City Council. But they've also found that young people are being affected disproportionately, and that's a really important thing. There's also been a rise in what's called leavism, which I hadn't even heard about before, but I found out about that in the last few weeks. And also, as we know, there's more short-term contracts, freelance work, and that creates more uncertainty. So there was quite a lot of negative things going on despite these changes that they tried to put in the 2017 report. Okay, so the report goes into 3 deep dives, so I've read it all for you and I've presented it here, so you don't have to read all the way through the report. But there's 3 things that I've highlighted in the report that I think are probably worth looking at. And the first one of those 3 is what's called leavism. So I'm just going to ask you, do you really know what leavism is? And I really didn't know what it was until the last few weeks when I've been doing the research. So let's just see if I can find the poll. Mental health, leavism. Do you know the meaning of leavism? Okay, I'm going to just put that in. Do you know the meaning of leavism? And the answer is yes or no. Okay. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to share that. I'm just going to get rid of that third one there. Okay, I'm going to share that with you now and just see. Do you know the meaning of leavism? Okay, there we go. Look, most of you don't, and I didn't know either a few weeks ago. And it's actually quite a complex subject, actually. So let's just take a little bit of time to really get our heads into this, because it's quite a complex thing, and it's a really big, important change in the way that people are relating at work. Okay, so we've got absences, absenteeism. That's pretty obvious. That's obviously when you're off work and you don't go in because you're ill or whatever. Presenteeism. Now, did you notice that the guy in the video just mentioned that in passing, presenteeism? This is actually a really, believe it or not, sometimes even a bigger concern than absenteeism. And that's when people go into work when they're not well, particularly if they're not mentally, they haven't got a right mental health, because what happens is they go in, they don't work productively, but they also affect all their workers around them. And this is a really big issue because it lowers the productivity, lowers the effectiveness of the entire team that they're working in. Okay, now leavism is another thing. It's got several different layers to it. We probably recognize some of these. I'm sure probably we've all done this kind of thing ourselves, maybe in the past. The first one is just actually booking holiday time or leave time. That's, like actual leave time, and then actually just working during that time to catch up with work that they haven't been able to do during their working hours. So there's actual taking off leave or holiday time. There's also taking work home and working during when you should be resting, or you should be having time off because it can't be completed, and then working when you're on leave or on holiday as well. Okay, so it's so it can be holiday time, sickness time as well. And so they've actually had people taking time off sick and booking it as sick time and then working. Okay, so it covers all those things: working when on leave, taking work home, and when you're feeling unwell, still using it to catch up work. And it's an increasing problem in the workplace. And as the guy in the video said, from Deloitte said, one of the main drivers of that also is the increase of use of technology, which means that people can never switch off. There can always be access emails and they can work from home and stuff like that. So, and of course, the pandemic has just increased that whole thing. Okay, so here we go. Look at this. This is straight out of the report, and this is in 2019. So you can imagine that this probably increased a huge amount since then. And you can see that 51% of employees work outside contracted hours to get work done. Okay, and then look at that. We've got allocated time, holiday times, or when they're unwell, nearly over a third. Time off, holidays, 27%, and only 37% said that they hadn't experienced any leavism in their organization. So that's some of the stuff from the report. Okay, so that was the first deep dive. The second one was financial well-being, and this is obviously another big concern. Notice that the young people disproportionately affected, 18 to 40 is a young group. They're half as productive as those without any problems. And also they've noticed that lifestyle choices have really changed. So you've got smoking, obesity, hypertension, high cholesterol, sleeping issues, okay, all those kind of things, stress-related things are obviously going to be much more likely. And they've all been tracked and they're all in the report if you want to read it. Okay, and young people, I've got a poll coming up for this because this is something we've really noticed in the Shiatsu Center. But look at this. I was really quite shocked by some of this. We've got like almost a fifth of 18 to 20-year-olds suffering from depression. That's an absolutely huge number. And a quarter of the young people are smoking, which is, again, really upsetting when you think of all the progress that's been made in early generations to try and reduce the amount of smoking. And sleep, which is another great area for Shiatsu to contribute to. You've got over half of young people are having problems sleeping. So I thought I'd just run another poll now and just find out if you've noticed an increase in any in young people seeking Shiatsu treatment for stress over the last few years. Have you noticed that the demographic has changed? So you're getting more young people in. So let me just see if I can find that poll. Here we go. Yeah. Have you noticed an increase in young people seeking Shiatsu treatment for stress over the last few years? And here's the poll. And here it's coming up. I just wondered if you noticed that in your practice. Okay, look, we've got, not quite such a strong majority as before, but we've got a pretty good 2/3 majority noticing that trend. And we've definitely found that in the Shiatsu Center. And so that's obviously been highlighted by the report, and that's right out there. All that information is right out there for employers now. Okay, now this is the very interesting bit that I think is so important, because I was saying before, we would like to think that big employers would want to look after their employees just because they want to care for people. But there's something else which is to do with productivity, and something else that's really important in terms of giving help and support to organizations, and that's ROI, which means return on investment. And that means basically, is it worth their while doing things in the organization to help to support people's mental health? And the answer is a massive yes. And it's in the report. I'm just going to run through some of the figures here from the Deloitte report. Okay, they already know from 2017 report that ROI in mental health in the workplace is largely positive. Okay, but this is the updated research that came to the 2020 report. It ranges between 0.4 to 1, 10.8 to 1, with an average ROI of 5.2 to 1. Now, what does that really mean? What that really means is that on average, if the organization just spends £1 or €1 on mental health for its employees, it's going to get €5 back on average. And the range is quite big as well. We'll see later in a minute how it ranges, but that's a really massive ROI. And any organization basically that has that information is really going to be in their interests to do something about it. And that's really one of the drivers behind this report here, this mental wellbeing strategy report, which I was invited to the launch of in Norwich a few weeks ago. This mental wellbeing strategy, by the way, is closely modeled on those reports I'm just going through right now. So it's really, a hot topic, and it's obviously going to impact on loads of other organizations as well. So it's really quite, I think, very interesting to know what's going on out there. And it gets more and more interesting, because look at this. This is really interesting too. This is the return on investment on the types of intervention linked with the employee journey. And when they talk about the employee journey, they mean the employee's journey through the organization, through their working life, when they have crises, what happens, whether they're prevented, what can be done when that happens. Now, what I found the most interesting about this is that by the time you get to mental health support, like therapy sessions with a one-to-one practitioner, the ROI goes down, right down to just around 3-to-1. But if you have something like proactive mental health support, so in other words, health coaching by line managers, it goes up to 5.1. And then if you go to organization-wide awareness raising, which can take the place of personal exercise sessions, or it can take the place of web portals and things like that, the ROI is as high as 6-to-1. And I want to give you a little bit of background on that, because I'm pretty sure you probably know by now that during the pandemic, we set up the Wednesday class, the famous Wednesday class that we broadcast from this very room. And it's been extremely popular. We've got almost 1,000 people signed up for it now, and we're still getting between 40 and 60 people coming every week for the live sessions. And we know from feedback that many people are watching the recordings. And this has really been very interesting, because we know that some employees, some of the people who work at Norwich City Council have really benefited from those Wednesday classes. And if you think about that, these are extremely economical to put on. I mean, we actually fund these through our community, our local Shiatsu community membership, and through New Energy Work. They're funded through that. They are relatively inexpensive to put on, because we've got all the equipment and everything, and we've got the expertise to do it. But you think of the amount of positive effect that can have, and that's where you're going to get those very high ROIs. Now, that can be taken out as well, of course, into one-to-one sessions as well. And what it made me think of is, it made me really think of, like in China and in Japan, for example, where there are exercise classes before work or within the work time. There's actual exercise classes. And think about Tai Chi and how that's embedded into Chinese culture. So people tend to do Chinese-based Qigong or Tai Chi every day before they go to work and things like that. So I was just thinking that the kind of thing that we're doing with our Wednesday class, taken either in person or tailored web portals, is a great way that we can contribute, especially as you think that all the research that's been done on focusing, mindfulness, Qigong, there's lots and lots of research that show health benefits from those exercise systems. And most of us have got a pretty good handle on at least some of those systems just from being Shiatsu practitioners. So I think that we can really, really contribute there. Okay, now this is another interesting thing. I found this very interesting, is that if you look at this is again return on investment, again ROI, and look at how it varies depending on the size of the group. So you've got obviously one-to-one sessions going to be relatively expensive. So you'd expect that to be lower, because you've got to have a professional trained to do like one-to-one therapy. But you look at a group size, you look at a small group size, that's where it's actually the average ROI is the highest. So that indicates that something like the Wednesday class with say 40, 50 people attending it, or a face-to-face class of a similar number, that's where you're going to get the most benefit. When you get out to universal things where you're more general and it's just like access, it's not so personal at all, and that goes out, that's when it starts dropping back down to 5.6. So again, I think that's another more evidence again that for that group work, either online or in-person group work, would be something that an employer really should seriously be looking at. And again, as I say, Shiatsu practitioners, I believe we've got the perfect skill set to contribute that. And a little bit later on the webinar, I'll just share with you how I'm setting up the protocol to really emphasize our skills and what we can do. Okay, now here's a few little facts. And this is where I was kind of like really shocked. These were some of the things that came up with the review in the 2019 review. Look at this, 1 in 10 people who admitted or disclosed that they had mental health problems were dismissed, demoted, or disciplined. Okay, and that's like really shocking. And this is another thing. Look at this. This is saying 1 in 4 employers said that they fear negative consequences if they make their mental health issues formal. So they're actually like worried about, 1 in 4 were actually worried about doing anything, just flagging it up. And look, less than half of people who were employed said that they would feel comfortable actually talking to a manager about their mental health. And that was one of the things that I have to say that I was most impressed by the launch of Norwich City Council's mental wellbeing strategy, because they had the CEO there, they had really high managers there supporting it. And the whole atmosphere really was quite inspirational, because basically what they were doing is they were sharing their own experiences of mental health issues in front of the entire workspace to create an environment of trust and openness about mental health issues. And to see that at such a high level in an organization really was quite impressive. I was definitely moved and impressed by that. It was a very impressive event. You can see that if there's will at high level of management, if there's the will to do it, it is possible to create a whole change in the atmosphere of an organization. Okay, look at this. This again was pretty shocking. Over half of managers reported that they had put the interests of the organization above their staff well-being, either sometimes regularly or every day. Only 1 in 5 of CEOs, that's chief executive officers, if you don't know, in other words, the boss, believe that their organization supports those with mental health problems very well. And junior managers who agreed with that was half of that. So only 1 in 10 agreed with that. So you've got a lot of embedded, an atmosphere in a lot of organizations that you've got to fight against. And only 9% of all employees surveyed have attended training that focuses only on mental health. Now that's really interesting itself. So it's quite low. And again, that's what really impressed me about the Norwich City Council mental wellbeing strategy, as we will find out a little bit later on in the webinar. So just stay with me and we'll get on to the next topic in a moment. Okay, so here the report, the Deloitte report, had 6 mental health at work standards which they put forward, and this report, which I was talking about, was based on those 6 things. So obviously I've read through them all, and I've been thinking, as I've been reading through it, thinking like, where could Shiatsu really, or Shiatsu practitioners' expertise, where could we really support it? A lot of it's quite institutionalized, like 1 through 4 is all about creating an open culture, developing programs, designing the actual work, designing the organization culture, okay, to drive those outcomes, and just basically working at an organization level. So a lot of them are internal, and I have to say that I was again impressed at the launch how the atmosphere was changed about that. It really was quite amazing. Number 6 is another more internal corporate thing, but number 5, and this is what I thought where we really could sit really well as a independent complementary health practitioner, and that's providing mental health tools and support, because as we'll find out in a minute, many organizations are building in mental health first aid, and that's, I think, the first time I've mentioned the topic, the actual title of this webinar series already. The first time I've mentioned it in this webinar. And that's where mental health first aid comes in, because what we can do is we can provide mental health tools and support, somatic based ones, at various stages of the journey of the employee, which we'll look at in a moment. Okay, and that's broken down in the report to 3 different areas. Raise awareness of the resources and tools available. Now that's very easy for us to do. If we're running a class, we might be running a community class, you might be running something like we do here. I know many New Energy Work members have taken the lead in this and done what we've done, which is put on online classes. just making those available, those free resources available or low cost resources available, is 5.1. Okay, now ensuring provision, the in-house mental health support, that's where the mental health first aiders come in. And also providing support around those contributors, those 3 things that we looked at before, those deep dive things, that's again part of the organization. Okay, so it's only just that 5.1, but just that, and also providing support to the mental health first aiders. That's where I think we can contribute. Okay, so here we go. And here it is, everyone. I know you've been waiting for this. This is the journey, the employee's journey. And it's in the report, it's very interesting. And I used it really to come up with a kind of strategy of where the Shiatsu Center or any Shiatsu practitioner working with an organization may be able to contribute to different stages. So what it does is it shows a journey starting at number 1 there on the left, through their journey through the organization. And it also has figures there that tell you what happens, how much it costs the economy overall if certain things happen. Okay, so first of all, we've got the employee in good health, number 1. They go on to number 2, okay, and they go into the organization. And again, this is where, again, I found Norwich City Council very impressive. They really are trying to change the awareness and organization in the culture, really putting a lot of energy into that. And that's exactly where we could provide things like the online Wednesday class. Even just having that as a resource would be something that would help support the organization. And the other thing that I think is really useful, that from our, and this is something that we've really experienced in the last 2 years since we've been doing the Wednesday class, is that because we've been training people using Qigong, self-shiatsu, focusing, we've been sharing our expertise on how we can regulate our mental health somatically through working on relaxation techniques, breathing techniques, releasing tension in the body, releasing frozen states in the body. Because we've been doing that consistently, we've found that 2 things have happened. When people come for Shiatsu for the first time, if they've been attending the Wednesday class, they've already got a lot more awareness of their own energy and their own patterns. And so they're able to receive the Shiatsu at a much higher level just straight away when they come in. And the other thing we've noticed is that our existing clients, who may have been coming for decades now, are suddenly interacting with this in a completely different way. They're actually saying, oh, that's that point, that does that. And I remember when I did the class, I did this and I could do that. Or they might come in and say, in the class last week, this happened. So they're taking more responsibility for their own self-regulation. And we'll get onto that in a minute. Their own somatic self-regulation. Now, my feeling is if that can be placed early on enough in the culture of the organization, then what will happen is, you'll get a lot of prevention because people will be able to self-regulate, catch things early, which is obviously the best thing, is to catch it early, and to be able to actively work with it. But also what will happen is, if there is a crisis further down the line, they'll already be halfway there because they will have so much more somatic awareness. And one of the things that we know, because especially if you've been watching and following New Energy Work webinars over the last year or 2, especially Cindy Engel's amazing webinars, you'll know that the latest neuroscience totally supports the fact that mental health is built on a foundation of information information from the somatic body. So in other words, dealing with mental health issues, it can be accessed directly by self-regulation through the somatic system. And that's very new stuff. We're talking about neuroscience that's only breaking in the last few years. And that's going to take a while for that to get through to general knowledge about how the body and mind interacts, but it will come. And I think modern Shiatsu practitioners are basically right on the edge of that new paradigm and that curve. And I think we need to take ownership of that and just say, we have those skills, we have traditional skills, they are being validated and by the latest neuroscience, and we're the people for the job to do that. I really, really believe that. So let's just have a look at the next slide. Okay, so the journey goes through. So we've got the stress management classes, the online classes, in-person classes early on. Then stage 3, you've got some kind of event impacts the employee. Okay, and then don't forget, we've got the note about young people disproportionately affected. We've already noticed that's happening with our clientele. Okay, and then suddenly they find that they need some help. You can see there how the gauge is going from the green into the red zone. It reminds me of the polyvagal theory there. Okay, so we've got, so by the time we get to, oh look, have you seen the ROI, by the way? It's a bit small. I know if you have got a small laptop or your phone, you might not be able to see that, but at stage 2 there, the average ROI is 6.1. So you're looking at a really good return on investment there for employers if you're listening to this broadcast. Okay, so by the time we get to stage, after stage 3, we've got proactive mental health support. This is where the mental health first aiders come in, and that's where we can help the mental health first aiders. More on that in a moment, so just stay with me and I'll explain the whole mental health first aid thing in a minute. So once we get to that stage, we've got a return on investment 5.1, 5 to 1. So that's still pretty significant. Okay, so now we get to stage 6. They've got a choice. They've got a choice of either going off work, that costs the economy £6.8 billion every year. Can you imagine that? And then you've got presenteeism. Remember that presenteeism? That's when they go in when they're not feeling well and just basically mess everything up for themselves and everyone around them, pushing themselves nearer to burnout. At that stage, you're looking at between 26.6 and 29.3 billion pounds lost due to presenteeism. Okay, and if that continues, then you go right through. The person really needs help. You get reactive mental health support, and then and then what you're looking at there is one-to-one sessions, and that's when the ROI drops down to 3.1. If you remember the slide earlier. Okay, and then this is where the mental health first aid support comes in. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then you've got employees leaving. Again, that's very, very expensive for everyone because they have to be retrained and everything, or you might have them stay, which is obviously what you want, and then they'll come back right the way through and go back into the cycle again. That's the employee's journey. Okay, and that's all in the report. And I've used that employee journey model to produce this, which maybe I should just mention now, which is this draft proposal, which has only just been, like I said, it's only just been printed and it's just been sent off this week. So I'll be interested during these webinars to see how it goes. And this is the mental health first aid supporters proposal. So I'll just go over that and I'll just explain what that is. Okay. I want to get some practical work in as well. So I'm hoping to get through these slides soon. Just stay with me with this. Okay, so this is where we actually get to mental health first aid. And I just want to know, I didn't know anything about this until a few weeks ago. So I'm just wondering whether you know anything about it. Are you aware of mental health first aid? Let me just see if I can find the poll. Do you know? Are you aware of mental first aid? Share now. Yeah, here we go. Let's see if you're aware of it. Just like to vote for that one. I might find that you're much better informed than I was a few weeks ago. Oh, look at that. It's about 50-50. So I won't spend too long on this if half of you are already aware of this. Okay, what I didn't know was that it was actually developed in 2000 in Australia. So if there's any Australians tuning in, well done, Australia. And it's now over many, many countries. If you look in Wikipedia, you'll find out whether your country has got mental first aid program. 3 million people have been trained, which sounds like a lot, but it's not really that many worldwide. So it's still relatively new. And the idea behind mental first aid is it's just the same as normal, whatever normal first aid is, which is basically to support people when they're in a crisis and then point them to appropriate professional help, or if the crisis resolves. Okay, so yeah, well done to those Australians that started it off. Betty and Anthony back there in Australia 2000. That's 22 years, 3 million people trained. Pretty impressive. Okay, and in England, you might want to know that it came to England in 2007, and now it's all part of the Department of Health, which I didn't know. You see, there we are, National Institute for Mental Health in England. It's part of the Department of Health, and it's part of this whole movement that went back to those reports, 2017 reports, to improve national mental health. It's a community interest company, Mental Health First Aid, and you can do a 2-day course to become a mental health first aider, and that's exactly what happened to my contact in Norwich City Council, because she is actually a trained mental health first aider, and she heads a whole team of mental health first aiders. And also another bit of the background is not only have we definitely had people being supported by the Wednesday class, but we've had some very significant early interventions with mental health, where literally people have come down from City Hall, which is only just over there, in a completely incapacitated state. And we've been able, just with like one Shiatsu session in the team here, to be able to help them and get them functioning again well enough to be able to really sort themselves out. So we have got a very good track record of early intervention using somatic techniques to allow people in a mental health crisis to be able to regulate themselves through the help of Shiatsu and other things I'll go into in a minute with the protocol that we've developed. So we've got a very strong track record, and that's why we were invited to the launch of this, because of that track record. We didn't go looking for it, we were invited in, which is of course always the best way these things happen. Okay, so that brings me to my pilot project, which I'm doing on behalf of the team. I've actually got it. I think I've got it here to share. Let me just show you. Yeah, okay, so if you'd like to have a look at the copy, you can download it here. I'll put it online as well, so you can, on New Energy Work, if you want to have a look at it. It's very, very short. Basically, it's highly focused. It's all budgeted and everything. What I did was I spent quite a bit of time actually reading right the way through this, looking at the Deloitte report, and then I based this report, this project proposal draft, very tightly on the Deloitte report and the Norwich City Council mental wellbeing strategy. So I wanted it to be, as concise as possible. It's not very long, it's only a few pages. And you'll see that I've got the mental health in the workplace journey in it at the back as an appendix. And basically the idea is this: it's quite simple, and it's very much a pilot project. Here's just a little bit of background. This is the stall, the table that I had at the launch event. It was a very big event in a big hall in Norwich, and there were people from Mind, NHS, various different charities all contributing to it. And so I took the stuff, the roll of stuff. I took all the Shiatsu books and acupuncture and TCM books that I had on mental health. You can see there's a polyvagal chart there. And also I took a laptop with a video of the Wednesday class, just to show what we've been doing at a sort of class level. Okay, so what I've put in this report, as you'll see if you've downloaded it, is I thought it would be really good to actually make formal what we do, just so that at a corporate level it can be understood, exactly what we do, because if we're looking for Shiatsu, what is that kind of thing? And I've got 5 main points here as part of the protocol. There's the health questionnaire and confidentiality policy. I think this is really, really important, because you really want to set up a safe space, and especially if they're being referred from a corporate setting, you want to make sure that the space they move into when they come into wherever they're being treated or helped is completely sort of like separate and protected, really, as a safe space away from that corporate environment, so that they can really relax and share how they are. Okay, the second point is assessment of the somatic effects of the client's mental health issues. And basically that's what we do all the time. We're working to find out what's happening in their bodies, what's happening to the nervous system, and how that's impacting on how they're feeling. Guided focusing, that's basically clean language. Clean language is essentially built on the foundation of focusing. That's where it came from. Focusing is, again, a well-researched and well-established technique, and it's something, if you've missed some of the amazing webinars that we've put on at New Energy Work, you need to go back to the guest webinar section in the free membership and just check out that recent webinar by Nick Pohl, which was a world-class 1 hour of explaining how focusing and clean questions is so powerful for bodywork and for developing positive outcomes. And then the other thing that I think is really important that we do with all of our clients that are in mental health distress, and that's basically assessing their breathing pattern and one-to-one coaching on the client's breathing pattern. And in fact, it's so important that next week, I'm going to devote the entire webinar to going deeper and deeper into how we can work with the client's breathing to regulate the nervous system. I'm going to bring in all different theories, polyvagal theory and everything, and relook at that in great detail. And then finally, number 5 is a Shiatsu session. And just to explain what that is, it's focused on the relief of somatic effects of mental health issues. And that's really just to get that knowledge going that mental health is actually sit on a somatic foundation there of awareness of the body. So that's the protocols working. It's in the project proposal. Okay, so just going over these briefly before we go into some practical work. I just want to do a practical exercise with you before we finish. Is creating that safe space, having the questionnaire, making sure that they feel okay, whether you fill that in. I would recommend if you get someone who's highly distressed, it's probably a good idea that you help them do that. Really establishing the confidentiality of the session, and also working on that unconditional positive regard. Basically, whatever state they're in, especially if they're in the dorsal vagal state of polyvagal theory, they're probably feeling some shame about the free state, perhaps. Really, it's to break out through that and to give them an atmosphere of personal positive regard, unconditional positive regard. Okay, clean questions. This is where we do our practical focusing. It's completely client-centered. We're increasing their self-awareness. We're getting them to tune in internally and increase their somatic awareness. And as I mentioned before, that's like one of the most important things to establish early on. So that brings us to the whole thing about interoception. And I'm sure you know what it means, but maybe you don't. So I'm going to run a poll just to find out. Do you know what interoception means? Let's see. Okay, well, thank you for letting me know. We've only got half saying a confident yes. Okay, well, I'd say this is a really important thing. It's something probably you'll go, oh, I know what that is when I say, because interoception is probably the single most important foundation of switching the whole idea of mental health being completely a head-based mental thing. Because what we're doing with interoception with clean language is we're basically getting the person to tune in to what's happening inside their body. Now, I know this might sound so obvious to us because we've probably spent decades doing exactly that with our own practice, with our own Qigong exercises, with our own Shiatsu exercises. It's probably just too obvious for words, but it's easy to forget that most people have a degraded sense of interoception. And there's lots of reasons for that. And we're going to be investigating them in detail in our Shiatsu Summer School, which is coming up in July and August. I am pretty excited. We've got some pretty big names lined up. I'm waiting for the final lineup and I'll be showing that soon. So we'll be getting doing some important stuff on interoception then. Interoception is being able to experience what's happening inside your body. And that's a skill that we can help our Shiatsu clients with through the exercise classes, but also through the actual treatment itself. The important thing about that is the ability to sense what's happening in the body is the first step to being able to self-regulate. And that's, I think, one of the biggest contributions we can make to clients that come in for a Shiatsu session. When they go away, they suddenly have an enhanced perception of their own internal environment, and also by doing some very simple exercises and recommendations and guided imagery with them, we can help them on the path to self-regulation. Okay, so hooray, I have left enough time. We've got 10 minutes left. And I'd like to do a simple, really simple exercise. We're going to do an interoception exercise, okay? I'm going to do it sitting up, but you can lie down if you're feeling a little bit tired after 50 minutes of intense slides about mental health first aid and its role in the work environment. But I'm going to ask you a question first of all. I'm going to ask you a simple question, and I'd like you to write down the answer to it. I'm going to do it myself, and then we're going to do an interoception, a focusing exercise. It's going to take about 3 or 4 minutes, maybe a little bit more to do. And then I'm going to put a poll up and we'll see, okay? So I want you to imagine that you're my client and we're doing the questionnaire. You just filled in the health questionnaire. And I'm asking you, how are you, okay? So I'd like you to just think, how are you feeling? Okay, or how are you? And I want you to write down the answer, and I'm going to do the same thing for myself. I'm going to ask myself the same question, right? How am I? Okay, and I'm just going to say, okay. Okay, and what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through an we're going to do it together, an interoception exercise, just as an example, just about 4 or 5 minutes. And then I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to poll you and see whether anything's changed. Okay, so just remember that feeling of how you are in yourself. I feel a little bit tempted to lie down and do this because it actually works really well lying down. But just so if you want to lie down, you've got space to lie down, I would recommend you do that. But if not, you can do it sitting up. And as I say, we're going to spend just a few minutes doing that. I'll just bring up the slide again just to remind you. We're going to just do a journey inside our body, an interoception exercise, focusing exercise, and then we're going to draw a picture of what we find, okay? It's best if you actually close your eyes for this, because as you close your eyes, you'll find your awareness goes internally, okay? So let's just go inside our body. So we're going to forget about the outside, obviously you can't see anything, you've got your eyes closed. Just ignore the external environment in terms of sound, and direct your audio perception more inside your body. Can you hear anything happening in your body? Maybe your heartbeat. You may be able to hear some blood rushing around. You may be able to hear your breathing. Maybe able to hear your heart beating. Okay, but then we're going to go beyond that sense, that traditional sense, and we're going to go internally, and we're going to just get a sense of our internal landscape, and we're going to scan down slowly through our body and see if we can get a sense of how we actually are right now. Okay, so I'm going to do it with you. We're going to close our eyes. Okay, so let's just start off with the head. And we're going to scan down through the whole cranium, sensing and asking ourselves a clean question, which is, what is it like? What is your brain and your head inside your skull, what is it like? Okay, so now once we've kind of sensed the skull, we can go into just the eyes, around the eyes. And again, we're asking ourselves a question, what are they like? And then we go into sinuses, around the forehead and below the eyes. And then we can feel the jaw, sensing the jaw, asking ourselves, what is the jaw like? Okay, and then the mouth, the lips, the gums, and the teeth. What are they like? And then we're going to go into the ears, and then down and into the neck and the throat. So nice and relaxed, we're just bringing our awareness inside, tuning in, asking ourselves, what is our throat like? What is our neck like? Okay, and then we can go down onto the shoulders, inside, tuning in inside to the muscles around shoulders. Okay, and then we can go even further internally and feel the spine, experience the spine. What's that like? The cervical spine, that's the neck. And then the upper spine. Okay, and then we go down. We can just check out our arms. So we going into the inside feeling of the shoulders, down through into the elbows, wrists, fingers, and hands. So we're just going down through the bones and muscles of the arm. Just asking, what are they like? And then we go down through the chest cavity. So we've got the lungs and the heart. Down to the diaphragm. A lot more on that next week. And then down through into the abdominal organs. And now we've got a lot going on there. So let's just sense what it's like internally around the abdomen. All the internal organs there. Just asking yourself, what is it like? Very good. Okay, and then we go down into the hips. Again, internally feeling the hips. And then down the legs. Muscles and bones and joints of the legs and knees, ankles and the feet. Okay, so again, checking out the spine generally, internally. And then just kind of taking a step back and getting a sense of the whole body internally, just feeling the whole internal landscape of our body, and ask yourself, what is that like? Okay, and then turn that into a picture. And we draw it. Okay, so just take a minute just to draw it doesn't have to look like you. It's just the internal somatic experience of your body. And just draw in anything particular that you felt. Looking a bit like a Martian myself, but there we are. It doesn't have to look like a person at all. It's just a kind of map of anything that you sensed when you went through. Okay, so now the question I'd like to finish the webinar is, has that made any difference to how you feel about how you are? In other words, has that added anything to your feeling of how you are? So that's the, yeah. So did the interoception exercise increase your awareness of how you are feeling? Yes, no, or not sure. So I'm just going to do that and then we can finish up. Here we go. get that poll up. Okay, so did it increase your awareness? Okay, you might finish off your drawing. The question and the answers are yes, no, not sure. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Did it increase your awareness doing this interoception exercise? Yes, no, or not sure. Okay, I assume those of you who voted no already had a pretty good idea of what was going on in your thing, but you notice that most people found that very positive in terms of how they found out more about how we were, and certainly was that in my case, I must say. Okay, so just quick review and then we can finish up. We've looked at mental health in the workplace. We've looked at the Deloitte report and the other reports. We found out what mental health first aid is. I'm glad you know now, everyone. And I've talked a little bit about the pilot case study. I've shared that with you, Norwich City Council. And over the next 2 weeks, I'll let you know how we're progressing with that. And we've started to develop a Shiatsu-based protocol exploring the process. Okay, so next week, what I want to do is I want to spend the whole session on belly breathing, lower abdominal breathing, polyvagal theory, breathing issues and how we can deal with them with Shiatsu and TCM, and also look at some points that are important in breath regulation. Because I think it's really important to actually be able to coach people to regulate their nervous system via breathing. And it's something that we're really good at. And Shiatsu, so let's just hone our skills. We can put that as part of our protocol to take to anyone that wants to, employ us or wants us to help out in their organization. Okay, thank you very much. I haven't had a chance to look at the chat. I hope you enjoyed that the last hour, and I hope to see you next week on the webinar. There we go. Great, here we go. Fantastic. Okay, great. Lovely. I'm going to put a heart on the chat and then sign off. See you next week for a whole hour on breathing. We'll be completely chilled out by then. Okay, thank you for your attention. Thank you for being with us, and see you next week.